Hey, greetings, creepers. This is Dr. Leech, the Leech Doctor from dailynightmare.com, and this is the third in our series about ritual, about things that make a powerful and effective ritual. And boy, howdy, do we have a great ritual today. I will be describing my experience with, I think, the single most effective ritual I have ever participated in so far in my life. Life is long. And it's a secret ritual, or at least it was performed as when I was a member of an organization that, well, others might have described as a cult. And this would be a perfect time to unsubscribe, walk away, pretend you never heard of this channel. Go find a nice cat video or something. Still here? Cool. I predict this will be a particularly long video, and that's not because I have done any wild divination, but it's just because I anticipate spending a luxurious amount of time in the story time. And even then, I'm not certain that any of this is going to make sense to someone who doesn't know what I'm talking about. So I'm going to start with three things just to sort of prime the pump. And the first is I want to be clear, I am no longer a member of this organization. I am not in contact with anybody who is in active membership of this organization. And in fact, I'm not 100% certain that it's still doing what it was doing when I was with. I will lapse into talking about we and us, and that's primarily a storytelling technique because it makes things a little more exciting, a little more immediate. I am not trying to pretend that I have any authority based on a membership in this group. I am deeply grateful for the time I spent there. There are things I learned that I do practice daily. So out of respect, I am going to file the serial numbers off as much as I can from this group, just because I out of respect, I am not with them anymore, and there are enough specific aspects that, you know, if you're a clever person, you'll be able to figure it out. And well, aren't you the clever one? Second thing is that we were a consensual energy exchange group, and I will unpack part of that. But first and most importantly, this allows me to unambiguously use the phrase or the metaphor of energy to describe magic or woo-woo or chi or prana or whatever it is that we do when we're doing something not normal. I don't mind it as a metaphor, but I think it's on the verge of becoming a dead metaphor, which makes it seem obvious, and it loses all the cool power of a metaphor, frankly. I will have a video about my nitpicking problems with talking about energy, but this group totally talked about energy. Second of all, is part of it was, I think the core of its whole practice was becoming able to be to give consent when one is exchanging energy. So often, so many people are unconsciously either feeding off of you from the energy sources due to an intrinsic lack, or pushing energy into you to try to manipulate in certain ways. Not everyone is malevolent. I think most people are just unaware that they're doing that. Part of this practice was to become aware of the ways one is most comfortable using energy. What I loved about this group, which is going to be a theme all throughout all these videos, probably this whole channel, is I loved how empirical and how evidence-based and research-oriented they were. It was not doctrinaire. I am allergic to pious bullshit like that. It was very much like, well, look at how you behave in the presence of certain kinds of energy. When do you feel fulfilled, and when do you feel challenged, and when do you feel most secure? Maybe there's a way of working with that. Maybe there's a way of observing and enhancing the ways that you normally most comfortably do stuff. There were various different games we would play to practice and become aware of this. I'm trying to think of the best way to explain one setup is almost as if a tabletop role-playing game. And I'm not meaning that irreverently, but like how while you're going to play a certain tabletop role-playing game, there are different classes. There are different sorts of things that you're just built best to do. And there were three of those classes, generally speaking. Then some folks are, well, they're naturally very good at grounding and making things safe and patrolling boundaries and making yes, security is the best way they work with energy. They find that stray little bits of chaos and they get it under control. And then there are other folks who are really, really good at finding energy all around and shaping it into becoming a fit vehicle for their will, for making cool things happen. And then there was a third kind that were, wow, they just feel a little bit always too full of energy, and then they are constantly trying to give it away. Um, they are most comfortable when they are sharing with other folks. And that could be on a dance floor, that could be walking in a crowd, that could be talking with folks who are excited about something. I'm reminded of the quotation from Nietzsche that there are two ways to suffer, one of which is not having enough, and one of which is by having too much. They also were very empirical about looking at your energy body, is one way of describing it. In a lot of New Age circles, there's the discussions of chakras in a way that traditional religious practitioners may not understand. And so much of that discussion is very doctrinaire, is that there are these ones and they have these colors and they behave right like this. And this group was not like that. It was observe your own body. You may have modified your energy body at different parts, or had it modified for you in order to do this other work that you do. And I loved the idea that we were actively encouraged to observe and to experiment and to work with how we were structured. The organization had a motto, at least at that time, that I would have, if I had tattooed on myself, I would still highly endorse, and it was seek your own truth. And that still resonates with me. It's very close to the core of everything I do, of what I'm doing with this channel, and specifically with this series. The idea of observing and enhancing and just doing what it's true for you. I again am interested in capital T truth, and I kind of believe that the fastest way to get to capital T truth is through being totally honest with your small t truth. Hence, my reliance on the method of storytelling. I believe that is the clearest, most unambiguous way to get to truth, capital T truth. If you're still with me, the third part is even more exotic. I mean, to the degree that we did magic at all, we did theurgy. And theurgy is the pursuit of awareness of your, well, some folks would say your divine being, the holy guardian angel stuff. You were trying to find your higher self. And the specific way to get to that access of one's higher self was through past lives, past life memories, past life experiences. To the degree that there was doctrine in this group, we had the understanding that we were a soul group who had elected to go through in various incarnations together in and the organization had this just utterly beautiful charge, this poem that we said at the end of every ritual, that it's one of those moving poems I think I've ever memorized, that I will not be saying here. The idea that after one had uncovered enough of these past life memories that one could possibly abstract into what this higher self, what are the enduring contours of what you're about in your whole existence, not just the dharma of this particular life, but the whole shebang. And this was a big ask for me. I um I am not most comfortable with the assumption of reincarnation. That just is a um, that seems highly implausible to me as a on a mere factual level. But as I worked with this group, it was well, I mean, I'm going to say probably the most wonderful effect of this particular ritual was that I felt not just allowed but empowered to use the metaphor of past lives to understand myself, understand what I'm doing now. What I loved about this too is this group was not afraid to shy away from dark things. I mean, they never would call this the holy guardian angel. In fact, one of the leader of the group, who the class that I felt most at home with, said, you know, my higher self is kind of an asshole, and that's a brilliant observation. That is that links together with so much of what I understand about Jungian shadow work, um, and that it's not the shiny, happy, beautiful stuff that we read about in magazines or on the websites or those influencers on the social medias. Um, we can actually be very compelled by certain things that are, you know, maybe not of this time. Um, anyways, I still don't know how much of any of this is going to make sense. But are you ready for a story? So I arrive for this ritual in a nondescript subdivision far outside any metropolis, somewhere in the Midwest. The You drive down the snaking streets of this subdivision, like any subdivision, and these are comfortable homes. They feel very suburban. They don't feel urban or odd or exotic, and come up to one, a little cul-de-sac, and there is a house there that looks just like every other one. And this was not the first time that I had been to this particular house on this particular street. I had been invited there over a year before to participate in um, an outer court-ish version of one of their rituals, and I was struck by how normal everything felt. I mean, when I saw the other members of this order sitting around the living room, they were talking about normal stuff. Two of them were playing on their phones. Folks were playing different music. They were talking about, I don't know, different games they had played. There was nothing too poser. There wasn't like, hey, I'm a big bad magic user, which, to be honest, if you hang around pagan communities, you get enough of that. You get tired of that kind of nonsense. And there was a low bullshit vibe going on. Then at the appointed hour, we filed downstairs because, I mean, where else would you have a dark ritual? You'd have, of course, in your basement. We walked down the stairs, and I believe on the landing there was a big bookshelf with poetry on it, which makes me feel at home immediately. Filed down a little farther, and there was a plaque with a quotation. I remember it being from Jung, but what's strange is that I remember that it's in Latin, and I don't remember Jung primarily writing in Latin. At least 7 floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, all filled with not the fluffy bunny style magic books, but the eclectic works of Jung, the more anthropological works on the mudras of Tibet. This was serious stuff, and due to a bibliophile like I am, I felt immediately at home with that. Oh my goodness, they have books, and well, they also have a dry basement because they can keep their books in the dry basement. But a curtain had been pulled along to keep that just a little bit separate. And then the first group goes in, and those are the folks who are more comfortable with security, with maintaining boundaries, with making sure no nonsense is happening. They ground out that chaotic, stray, staticky kind of energy. They are very good at holding space, and they just make sure that there's no leftover nonsense going on. They empty out the place. They get it set and ready for what we're going to do. And then the second group comes in, and that was the group I was with. We were by that point the leader of that class had synchronized our energies, so we were all on the same vibration. That's another metaphor I just can't stand, and yet that's a great way of conveying this sort of confluence of energy. We were very individual folks, but for the moment we were jibing. We were if we were a jazz quintet, we'd be in the pocket, if you know what I'm saying. She let us in, and we circle around, and we start acting as a conduit, I guess is the best way of describing, for the energy that was around us. This was a trick you learn really early on, is you don't feed your own energy, or else that's just like Hollywood producers. You don't never invest your own money. Don't use your own energy. You're going to end up on the floor. But you're acting as a conduit, shaping all those bits of connection with the cosmos, pulling it all in. We started with a point in the center, and then we kept moving it out, kept making it a little larger, a little more vibrant. And there was always this uncanny moment in any of these rituals when that region of energy passed through you. It was a sensation that it's very difficult to explain, but the energy passed through us and then went to the edge of the established field that the first folks had, cemented into space. And it was ready. We had all the building blocks. The mise en place was all set. And then that final group comes in, and they settle in, and they start creating the temple. And that's the language they used. I'm not keen on temple just as I'm not overly keen on the word ritual for what we did. But they would create columns, and then they would create arches that went across, and then filling up that space. And I had done this ritual I had done this style of ritual many times before I actually had gone down to the house where it all began. And the one thing I noticed was that in addition to going up, this temple went down, and it had a basement, and it had a foundation, and it had stuff going on downstairs as well. Incidentally, this is the only time in all the rituals I've ever participated in, it's the only time that I've ever been able to perceive the ritual space in this uncanny sensory way. I can intellectually realize it's there. I can test it in other rituals, but this time, as in all of the rituals of this style, I was able to actually perceive the space. And it was also very interesting because each one of the shapers, the temple builders, had a different aesthetic. So some of the columns were like old, Grecian Doric columns, and some of them were more, I don't know, Japanese, I guess. And some of them were, modernistic. It was sort of a janky collection that hummed, that was solid, and that felt safe to do the work we were gonna do. And this was true of any ritual I did with the members of this order. They also performed, I guess, outer court rituals with other folks, and those felt they felt stable because they were anchored by members from this order, but they also felt cluttered a bit. I bet would the best way to describe it. With the unfocused energies, maybe, of the other participants, and that was not what happened at the rituals that happened in this particular basement. Everyone I went to was solid, tight as a drum, and which was really fun because these folks weren't solemn and reverent. They were cracking wise back and forth. They were able to both be in a reverent headspace. They were in a ritual headspace without being uh, pious, without being the high woogity woo. And I just loved that. The ritual had very specific contours, and I won't get into that because I don't think that's actually very important. But since this was a certain time of the year, this order had a set series of 8 rituals. I mean, they corresponded roughly to the solar holidays. You know, the solstices, the equinoxes, and halfway in between. That's not that big of a thing. Half of them were led by the dark side priest, which was winter, and half of them were led by the light side priest. 2 seasonal rituals before, I had um, dedicated into this group. That was the word they had used to describe someone who was interested in learning more about them, um, who was ready to cast their lot in. It was a style of commitment that was perhaps better before the internet, because it assumed that you didn't know too much. I had gone into this order having read all the major books by the members of the group. At least one of them I'd read multiple times. It was actually kind of amusing. There's this interesting hermeneutic that happens when you gain experience with anything, I suppose. First time through the book, it was like, oh, it was very interesting. You know, oh, that's really intriguing. I think I would very much like to participate in something like that. And then I found that group of energy workers. The energy workers, that is what they called the local working group, which is funny because that always reminded me of the Wichita linemen. Maybe that doesn't anyone else. We did energy games on a monthly basis, and actually we had started doing other kinds of like ritual stuff. So we had worked into a fair amount of familiarity with the system. So then I reread the book, and there were sections in that book that I swear weren't there the first time I read through. So at the time of the ritual I'm describing, I had dedicated into the group. I was doing active energy exchange with at least a couple members, and I reread the book. And I swear there were vast sections of that book that I had not read before. I will discuss that kind of phenomenon of hermeneutic revelation when I talk about initiation. There is something that how experience unfolds your ability to sense material. Even reading a book, this was going to be the first ritual as a dedicated member at the, I guess we call it the Covenstead, at the original house where it all happened, done by the person who had written most of the major works. This was also a remarkable thing, is that I was in a room filled with the people who had created this ritual and who had performed it, I think, almost 20 years at that point. One of them talked about it being a living tradition, which is important. A living tradition is important to me because that avoids a dead orthodoxy. So the ritual starts, they do all of the things they do. And since it was tied in with the general emphasis on past life reclamation. This was uh, to help ease your ability to have those kinds of experiences. During the dark side, during the long nights and the cold evenings, it's a perfect time to have revelatory dreams and tell ghost stories and that kind of thing. It's a great time for unpacking the non-mundane realities of one's life. My dreams always just go off the charts starting in October, and they're like that until mid-February. I swear, I mean, part of the reason why I started Daily Nightmare was as a dream journal for my uh, disturbing dreams that were, I swear, sometimes not mine. As I recall, they had a small bowl of oil, some kind of consecrating oil. And one by one, they went around and they would dip their fingers in, touch you on your forehead, awaken, touch you on your lower dantian, uh, your gut. Um, Remember, and then touching you right in your solar plexus, become. And of course, I had heard that happen to everyone else around the circle. And when the priest came to me, um, they I checked this in my journal. They spoke a specific uh, epithet to describe me that was that they had never used before, which was interesting. And then um, gave me a specific piece of advice um, that was extremely profound and actually worked. Um, it was very important for various other things that would happen later. Uh, and I'm not going to share it because it's probably not going to be important to you. And when they said become, um, the experience I had, and I can't believe that I'm going to be referencing a superhero movie here, but that movie Doctor Strange with the amazing Tilda Swinton, when she knocks that arrogant, pretentious doctor out of his body. They're in Shangri-La or wherever they are. Um, that was the temple. That was the experience I had. That I was knocked on my ass astrally. Um, and I explained earlier that past life stuff that really wasn't. That's not really working for me. That's not really the most comfortable metaphor set. So I was playing with it. I was, yeah, sure, you know, and I experienced this somewhere between giving me permission and giving me a command. And all of the intellectual inhibitions I had about doing the past life work, it just became easier. It just became way easier. And I was able to do much more productive play using that metaphor. The ritual closes down. Uh, the builder class, they take everything down, and then the folks who generate the generators, shall we say, they eat as much energy as they can. They figure it. They do all what they can, and then the security team comes in and cleans it all up. And we went upstairs, and I can tell it was a really good ritual because I was like sitting in a chair, just like sort of a little bit out of it. And the other person who had dedicated at the same time as me sensed that there was something a little odd, and so she gave me a piece of polished, I think it was malachite. I don't do stone, so I don't really know, but it was just like one of those like little worry stones that fit perfectly in my hand. and I held on to it, and then the leader of my class came over and was like, "You okay?" And like, yeah, I was, I was really okay. So there are three aspects I want to tease out of that story, just to prepare for when we talk about the attributes of what makes a ritual powerful and effective. First of which is, I mean, looking back on those rituals, they are um, the ecology, I guess the way I would describe it, it is so elegant and clear. That ritual could have been performed on a spaceship. It could have been performed on the moon. It could be performed anywhere. So many other rituals are implicitly based on, well, this planet. They are oriented to the different directions. They are oriented to the up and down. That's not the way this ritual worked. This ritual was focused so strongly on us, on the folks who were present. Um, and also, it was I suppose it'd be very good for a hiker, in that anything they carried in, they carried out. There was no stray little bits of energy. There were no gewgaws and penny candy. There were no weird little bits of tools or uh, sigils drawn on the ground. It was very tidy. And the second thing I should probably mention is that that's not the way everybody tells the story of their time with this group. There are folks who are, um, well, as I mentioned at the beginning, who would call this a cult. I feel like I should be flashing a number in the bottom with the cult support hotline. I don't know of any that do that. I certainly did not experience this organization as a cult. Um, I would be interested in exhorting you, if you are ever on the verge of joining a group, be very conscious of your own boundaries. Be conscious of whether your experience of the group is increasing your agency. If you have the sense, not just your belonging, because that's a way that I gather cults work. But your sense of agency and sovereignty in your sphere of influence in everyday life, uh, and is it enriching your experience? I My understanding is, in general, cults uh, contract down your experience to a very narrow, um, winnowed away kinds of connections. That wasn't the experience at all I had of this group. And it was a very tight knit group. These folks had developed these techniques together. They had, like I said, some of these folks have been doing this ritual for a dozen and a half years, 2 dozen years. Um, there was a great familiarity and facility with the work, which is exciting. And it can also be overwhelming on a sensory level. There's also well, I suppose authority structures work out um, in a cult system too, and that's why I was trying to touch on this, your sense of personal autonomy. I could have told that story much differently. I could have focused more on the interpersonal relations and some of the power struggles and some of the well, I could have focused on the reasons why I walked away, but that's not what I'm interested in today. I'm interested in what I took from them, what I am grateful for, what I have continued to do. Um, and which brings to the third part. What I think a good ritual does is it opens one up to participate in myth. And I'll unpack that more. I'm certainly, as the series goes on and as the channel continues. But I, up until that point, was using the metaphor of past life as if I was very consciously applying the metaphor, because this was, like I said, not comfortable for me. It was but I trusted these folks. I trusted that it was doing productive work in their life. And so sure, I'll give it a try. And I don't think I was overly successful until this ritual. And again, as I said, that injunction felt something between giving me permission to play fully, to just go for it, and maybe nearly a command. There was a sense of go forth, and do this. It was a collecting of my forces, and allowing me to do something that I consciously had wanted to do, and there was finding um, an inhibition. That might be one of the key takeaways of ritual in general. Of, like, what I'm saying is the mythic horizon, and from that period on, I was able to, I think, make great progress in uh, working through developing, being conscious of what I'm going to have to say past life material. This was a great work I had done, and that I started, and I eventually stepped away from. And again, I am extremely grateful for the work I did there, and for the processes I began while I was a member. If their interpretation of reality is correct, um, um, next time around, I'll be doing it with them again. Which brings us to the next in this series on ritual. If this was what turned out to be a once in a lifetime ritual, the next one I'm going to talk about is something I have done over a dozen times. It pushes ritual into something closer to a practice. It is the fire ritual of this shamanic group. But I'll talk about that next time. Until then, take care of yourself.